Welcome to the Business Trendsetter Podcast, where we talk about trends and lots of other things regarding your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. We help companies grow and scale. To learn about how we can help you, go to our website at sparkpartners.com. And Adam, there's been lots of activity, lots of things to talk about this week. And just a quick preface here that we are here as individuals talking about lots of things. We're not financial planners. We're not politicians, but we do talk about politics because it has to do with business. And the topic for today has to do with what just happened with Roe versus Wade. Of course, this huge thing that just happened, and we want to really bring to light some of the implications to do with business. Now, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life is not our business, but what is our business is helping you make the most of your business. So, Adam, what are your thoughts on this pretty sweeping change to the way things have been for the last 30 years?
Well, last week we talked about scenario plans and how you have to keep your scenario plans up to date. And this is a great example, again, just back to back another week, where we have something happening in the world that you need to use in your scenario planning. So what we've seen in the last 10 business days, has been a pretty sweeping change in how the Supreme Court behaves. And that is going to affect all the judiciary, because lower courts have if somebody objects to their ruling, then it moves up the process in the federal system until it gets to the Supreme Court. And a judge doesn't want to get overturned. So what a judge will say is, okay, here's what's happened, and I'm going along with this because I don't want to be overturned. Well, now what's happened is you've got the Supreme Court's overturned some pretty serious cases, actually 3 cases in this last 2 weeks, and it's changing the court. And I think as business people, we have to pay attention to this in a couple of different ways. We'll talk about the courts first, and then we'll talk about our employees second. So the first one was that the first decision that the Supreme Court made was it took a 100-year-old plus law in New York, and this was a law that limited the carrying of handguns. And that New York had this law, as I said, for over 100 years, and the Supreme Court said, nope, no more. That law no longer can be enforced, and the people of New York can carry these guns. That barely had a day for anybody to get upset about it or talk about it in the handgun world before Roe v. Wade got overturned. And that sort of took the spotlight again. Now, today, we've had yet a third decision. And this third decision today was a football coach who wanted to do a prayer, had been told he couldn't. It was a public school. He couldn't do these prayers at halftime. And the Supreme Court said, yes, he can. He can now do a prayer out on the 50-yard line if he wants to in the middle of a public high school football game. So these 3 changes are examples of where they have taken an existing law and reversed an existing law. So a lot of us go through life saying, well, hey, this action was taken by a court, that's now precedent, and anytime lawyers are arguing their cases, they're saying, well, this is the precedent. And we have to, I think as business people, start to be aware that you can't rely on those precedents the way you used to rely on those precedents, and it's probably going to have some impact. So let me give you another example. This has not happened, but a few years ago, there was a baker, I believe they were in Colorado, and they were asked to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. And the bakery refused, saying that they would not make a wedding cake for a gay couple. And it went to court, and the bakery lost. And they said, no, that was discrimination, and discrimination based on sexual preference, and they lost the case. Well, okay, in today's world, I think a lot of people might look around and say, hey, if that case came up again and rocketed through the system, now the lawyers would say, hey, look what the Supreme Court did in Roe v. Wade, right. Look what it did in these other 2 instances, and I think that this business person should be allowed to deny service. Now, there's a pattern to this, and the pattern is that think about rights in terms of the rights of the individual compared with what we want for the state, so that there's a balance there. It's kind of like, as an individual, I have freedom of speech, but we've said, okay, that freedom of speech doesn't allow you to go into a crowded auditorium and yell fire and create a riot and a stampede. Right. So that's the balance. The balance is what's good for people. What we're seeing in these 3 decisions is we're seeing a lot more shifting over to the people can do what they want. The rights are with the people, not with the state. If the guy wants to pray at halftime, Okay, the state's not going to stop him from praying at halftime. If some state says that it wants to deny abortions, okay, we're going to let them do that. If the state says you can't carry a handgun, we're going to overrule it and say, yeah, that's an individual, you can carry a handgun. And I think our audience out there needs to be pretty aware that this is liable to change their business. I was living in Nevada, as you know, and there was people would put signs up on the front door saying that no handguns allowed in the store, and that's because Nevada had a pretty liberal law in terms of people carrying handguns, and there were a lot of people who lived in Nevada who would be strapped up with a handgun going in, say, the grocery store. And so the grocer would put up a sign saying he didn't want the handguns in the store. Probably can't do that now.
Right.
Because now somebody, the court would probably say, wait a minute, if you've got the right to carry the handgun, then you as a business person can't stop that person from carrying that handgun in your store. Those are the kinds of the scenarios where we've got to say, hey, something that might have seemed simple and easy, like I can refuse service to anyone I want. Yeah, no.
Yeah, these are touchy subjects that you're right. They kind of bleed into the everyday vernacular of the business person. They need to be aware of these things. And I think the United States is obviously a very unique country in that our politics have always been sort of interesting and very dichotomous and very left or right, where other countries tend to be more in one direction or the other. I think we have our challenges as well as our opportunities.
Well, so I think our business people need to think about this now when it comes to our employees. We've seen in the Roe v. Wade decision that several companies have stood up and said, hey, if you want to get an abortion, you can go, I'll pay for an abortion in a different state. So Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, there's a long list of companies that said, if you want an abortion and you're in a state that bans abortion, Mississippi, wherever, and you want one, well, that's okay. You can go get one in a state that allows abortion, say California, and we'll cover the cost. And some companies have even gone so far as to say, we'll pay your travel costs to go to this state to get an abortion. That includes Disney and Netflix. I wrote them down here earlier. Disney, Netflix, and Dick's Sporting Goods have said they'll not only cover the out-of-state cost of the abortion, we'll cover the transportation costs. And this is where I think our business people have to start to be very thoughtful about what it is they want, what they're going to do. I think the odds are good that the current situation is going to apply for a while. Might there be a change in the future? Yes, there's a lot of people unhappy right now. So there could be legislative efforts undertaken. We could see a change in the Supreme Court, packing the court as it's called. These things could happen, but I don't think anything's going to happen in less than a year. Okay? So you need to be paying attention to this.
You've got to ride the wave.
Yeah, and what are you going to do? If your employees are you going to offer them to cover the costs out of state if you're in a state that bans abortion? Are you going to cover the travel costs? I think that's what's important for our audience to listen to. The second thing is I think now you have to really think about where you want to put your business. Okay, remember that Elon Musk of Tesla has been headquartered in Fremont, California, operations in California, and then he said, I'm moving the headquarters to Texas. And he went to Austin and did a big car show, announced it, and said, we're going to do a lot of work in Texas now. All right. His decision at the time was based upon business regulations and taxation, because there's no income tax in Texas. He, of course, is a very, very wealthy person, has very, very high income taxes. California has a 10% state income tax, and he didn't want to pay that tax. So he moves himself and the company to Texas, and he moves other operations to Florida. And he's saying, okay, this is good because there's low taxes. But now he's got all these workers, and how are the workers? Can he recruit? I don't know what's going to be like. We've got a lot of people. You want to grow your business. We've talked about how the demographics are not going to change. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a shortage of young people for a long time. It's going to be hard to hire. Where do you want to be? Yeah. Where do you want your business to be? Because probably what state you're in will affect who you're hiring and the success of your hiring. There's going to be some people that'll say, I don't want to live in Texas with its anti-abortion laws, or other states like that have anti-abortion laws. It could make it very difficult for you to recruit. Then you got to make another decision about how much am I going to allow the work from home, right?
Right.
We see that switching back and forth and how people are talking about it. And, interestingly, we saw that Yelp today announced that they're closing all their offices in New York. They're closing their offices in New York, Chicago, and the District of Columbia. Why? Because they said that it's easier for people to work from home. We can recruit better. We can recruit easier in those markets if we don't make people come into the office. And there's a headline on Market Watch that San Francisco, Chicago, and New York are all seeing difficulty to get people to return to the office. That basically, workers aren't going back to the office in those cities. So again, where are you going to put your business? Are you going to put your business somewhere? If you expect people to come to the office, you better kind of know what the terrain's like. What's the hiring like? If you want to recruit for people that can work from home, then go to a place where that's more considered the norm, or it's the expectation. So these things that are happening you can get caught up in emotion with them. And I think our point of view as business people has to be, how is it going to affect our customers? How's it going to affect our employees? How's it going to affect where we put our headquarters? And put that into our scenario planning and for making decisions.
Yeah, and I think
it's a big deal.
It's a massive deal, and I think a lot of business executives, owners, people that make decisions, believe it or not, I don't think they really think about these things very often. I mean, we believe it because we deal with folks like this all the time, but a lot of folks don't really think about how that Roe versus Wade is going to affect their business. They don't think how the open carry laws are going to be affecting their business, and they're going to be basically forced to do so when there's a situation that will have them behind the eight ball.
Yeah, I mean, we see on the television news periodically, somebody will come into a convenience store or a liquor store, for example, and attempt an armed robbery, and the store manager will be the owner, and they'll whip out a shotgun, and you got a gunfight ensuing, right? Is that what you want to do? I think you better think about this in advance. I had a conversation recently with a colleague of mine, and he was in the Army for many years. He was a general and retired, and he and I serve on a board together. And he is a person that has a handgun. And I told him I didn't have a handgun. And I went one day to talk to a store about buying a handgun. And the store owner was sizing me up, and he says, well, how are you going to store this handgun? And I said, well, I'm going to get a trigger lock for it, and then I'm going to get a box that's got a lock for it, and then I'm going to put the gun in one spot, and I'm going to have a second gun box, and I'm going to have the bullets in that other box, and that way I'll make sure everything's nice and safe. And he says, you don't want to buy a gun. I said, what? And he says, Adam, if you want a gun for self-protection, that guy who just walked in your house, he's got a gun loaded, pointed at you. You're going to unlock two boxes, load the gun, take the trigger guard off, and then you're going to be ready to try to defend yourself? Obviously, that's not a solution that's going to work for you, Adam Hartung, right? And so that's the kind of conversations we got to have. He pointed out to me, he said, I said, I'm in the gun business. So people come in here all the time, and they say they want a gun. And I always tell them, I said, well, are you ready to shoot someone and shoot to kill? Because if the bad guy walks in your house or he walks in your store and he's got a gun, he's probably going to shoot to kill. It's not the movies. If you pull a gun up, he's going to start firing. Are you ready to fire? Are you ready to shoot a gun at a human being and kill that person? Yeah. Because if you hedge and you think you can hold the gun up and go stop, you're dead. The bad guy's going to shoot you dead right on the spot. I thought this was very helpful to talk to.
Yeah, it's actually it's interesting he said that to you, right?
Yeah, but it helped me wise enough to realize that if I was in that situation, that would not be a resolution I could live with. I wouldn't want to threaten somebody with a gun because I would probably get killed, because I probably would flinch. I doubt that I would pull the trigger, and I doubt that I would be able to do that. Emotionally, I don't think I'm prepared for that. And so I want our business people out there to start thinking about this. Okay, we're going to have more people carrying guns. That looks like where the Supreme Court's going with it. And we're going to have different states are going to have different approaches to health care. I mean, it's going to go beyond Roe v. Wade. This is going to go probably into paying for contraceptives or not paying for contraceptives, paying for vasectomies or not paying for vasectomies for men. All kinds of things like that are going to now be talked about and discussed. But it'll be different. The discussion in California and the discussion in the state of New York and the discussion in Chicago, that's going to be different than the discussion that's happening in Florida or Mississippi, right? So where do you want to be? Where do you want to be? And historically, we've said, where can I get low taxes? Business people hate paying taxes, so they always try to go for low taxes, right? Where can I get tax breaks if I move my business in? And where do I go that employees will want to work? And I think now you're going to have to look beyond taxes, and you are going to have to really pay attention to your employees. You're going to have to, where do you want to work remotely, and where do you want to work if you're on site? And then you're going to have to probably do more polling and ask more questions and make sure that these things are going to work, because we're not in a homogenous United States.
And I think that's probably, at least in my opinion, one of our greatest sources of power is that we are so non-homogenous in our cultures, and we've got all these things going on. But it can also be a part of our downfall, that we have these struggles that we have to really contend with. That other European countries, the Scandinavian countries, are these quote unquote utopian places, but they have pretty solid demographics. They have culturally, they're very, very assimilated and sort of one way. And I actually wanted to bring something up to another question here and some thinking with respect to returning back to work. With respect to all that happening, let's talk about the WeWork, company and sort of the rise and the fall of all that. And what are your thoughts on that, Adam?
Yeah, well, I recently had the opportunity to watch a movie called We Crashed, which I think it was on cable. I don't remember now. It was Apple. I think it was Apple, but it could have been a different one. Anyway, if you get a chance to watch We Crashed, it's a multi-segment show. I recommend it. It's really entertaining. It's fun to watch and pretty close to accurate, too, at the same time. And one of the issues that I get hit with a lot are people that, especially if they're not really into business, like they're people that maybe work in the government or they work in another nonprofit sector, they can take offense to my passion for growth. And they can take offense to my passion for going where the customer is and selling product and all that. And they can they really can get offended. I have to be honest about that. They don't see where it comes from with me. And they think I'm not respectful of their point of view. And then what they'll say is, well, WeWork is an example of what's wrong with you, Adam. Look at this guy, Adam Newman, and he comes along and he creates this thing of vaporware, and it crashes in 6 weeks, and all these billions of dollars are lost. And that's Adam, what you're doing. You're creating these towers of Babel, telling everybody to grow, don't pay attention to earnings, don't pay attention to cash flow, grow, get your revenues, and look what happened at WeWork. So, okay, that's a scenario, and I get hit with that. So I wanted to come back at that and say that stories like WeWork I find very offensive, and it's because what happened in WeWork was the people who had the money dramatically overinvested without paying attention to where the money was going. So they were like, oh, how fast can you grow? Now, you've heard me say many times, growth covers a multitude of sins. And that's what they were letting happen. They say, well, Adam Newman, how many sites could you open if you had 100 million, 500 million, and eventually $4 billion if they gave you, how many could you own? And he was like, I can open all these. But what they weren't paying attention to was he was walking up to landlords and he was saying, I'll sign a 20-year lease at a super high price. He was outbidding everybody to get these properties, right? And he was paying so much that he couldn't even come close to covering the costs. So he was raising money every year to cover the loss of operations, which is perfectly viable unless you do it at that scale. Yeah. And you do it at that scale, and you're doing it in a way that it's not ever going to make money. Amazon took a long time to make money. And we've talked about Fred Smith and, Federal Express, and it took him 20 years to get to where he made money. But what you could see was that they were covering the majority of their costs. When they had a site running, the site worked. When they had a piece of business working, it worked. But as they grew it to the next piece, there was a loss until they got that to a certain size. So they got it to a certain operational set of metrics. In the case of WeWork, that wasn't happening. In the case of WeWork, they weren't sitting there saying, okay, here's an individual site in Philadelphia, it's profitable. Chicago, suburban Chicago, Schaumburg, each one of these, we open it, we get there, and it's profitable. And so we can go really fast because we can just open up a whole bunch more of these, and each one will get profitable as it goes along. That wasn't true. Each one was unprofitable. It was not a profitable business. It was not a business model that was sustainable from the beginning. Even at small scale, it didn't grow. And so I think you and I try to be clear with people. If you've got a business, you got a good business, you got to grow the business. You got to keep going. And losses are a result of what you did last year. But yes, you do have to have a sustainable business model. Right. And in the case of WeWork, they didn't have it. The second thing I want people to point out is all the people that got pushed out of that business. I mean, there were other people that had these standalone businesses where you could go rent office space. Almost all of them were pushed out of business by WeWork. They lost out. And the reason was because a competitor came in who had capital, and because they had capital, they could buy them out of the business. Mm-hmm. And that is something that our client base has to be very aware of. People say, well, I want to grow on my own money. Well, if somebody else raises money so that they could go out and grow faster, By covering losses with somebody else's capital, they can take you out of the game. And that's what WeWork did. So WeWork not only crashed it for themselves, they crashed it for everybody else. So what they needed was somebody who could be competitive in the marketplace that could sit there and fight the battle. And often our customer base will pick both ends of this in the wrong way. They'll take the end and say, hey, I don't want to borrow money. I don't want to raise external capital. I see that as a risky proposition, dealing with other people's money. And my answer is, you may not have that choice, because if somebody else takes on other people's money and they can afford to grow faster, they can afford to live on a thinner margin, then they're going to take you on. You know, it's what Walmart did. Walmart started off, proved that he could open 13 stores, 25 stores, and then what he did was he just drove it to a very thin margin and exploded quickly. It's what Amazon did, right? So if somebody decides to do that in your market and you're unwilling to raise capital, you will just get pushed out of the marketplace. Right. And that's one of the lessons you got to take from WeWork. The second one is, if you see one of these suicidal competitors come in and you know it, that's when you sell. Like, the smartest thing you could do if you were in a market and WeWork came in is you could look at what the building, look at what they were paying for a lease. You would go to them and say, right, I want to sell you my standalone. So I'm over here and I've got this building. Right. I might have 10 of them in some cities, and let me sell it all to you as a package. And then you capitalize and get out, because then you get your money before the market crashes.
For those companies and leaders that have that idea, that notion that, oh yeah, let's grow organically, it's a very noble thing to think about. But do you know, Adam, I just looked it up here, do you know how much debt Apple has?
Apple's a very low debt company. They had none like 10 years ago.
No, so they've actually flipped the switch. Now they've got over $200 billion in debt. Yeah. But they also have over $200 billion in cash. So what they're doing is they're being smart about how they can leverage their portfolio. And you see a lot of companies starting to move in this direction.
Yeah, I mean, if we take a look, we had free money for several years there, right? And I've heard people say it was terrible what was happening, like people going out and they're spending so much money for a house. And I got to, well, that's really not bad. If I was 25 years old and I could get a mortgage at 2.2%, well, I never in my life had a mortgage at 2.2. My first mortgage was at 18%, right? I was back in the stagflation days. But if I could get a mortgage at 2.2% and buy a house, that's what you should do, because now you're starting to build equity with this very low cost money. You know, we've gone from 2.2 mortgages to 5.2 mortgages in what, like 3 months, right? So now you've got this very low mortgage, and you can have that mortgage for several years. You can build up equity in your house. Real estate prices probably won't go up like they have in the past, because the higher mortgage rates mean that the monthly payments are much higher. But it means you're in a house, right? You got in there, and you got in there at a very low cost on your mortgage, because you're going to take, you've got your lifetime to pay it off. You've got 20, 30, 40 years to pay that mortgage off. That's different if you're 60. I mean, if you're 60 and you're going into that game, you're probably making a mistake. But for younger people, it's not a bad thing. Debt is not a bad thing, as long as you're smart about when you incur it and how you use it. I'll never forget, at the height of the stagflation in 1981, AT&T went out and raised like $1 billion, which was a huge amount of money in those days, on a bond. And AT&T was the bluest of blue chip companies then, 1981, super blue chip company. And they put out like $1 billion of debt at 18.5% on a bond. And they were stuck with a 30-year bond, 18.5% interest. That's ignorant. That's borrowing at the wrong amount at the wrong time.
That's speedy cash for a big business.
So you do have to be smart about finance, even as a small business. And for the last several years, I've been screaming, now's a good time to raise money, whether it's debt or a preferred type product, or warrant, a private equity kind of thing, or some kind of other equity investment. It was a good time because people couldn't get returns. Wealthy people, private equity, it was hard to get returns. If you could get 7-8% a year, it was really good, because money was free. And if you could, and that was a good time to take that money. Well, money's getting more expensive now, and so we'll see what happens. But it's still true that if somebody can come along and they can use other people's money to get into your business, don't sit back and do nothing. Pay attention.
I do want to talk about a form of quote unquote money, but I want to tell our listeners and viewers a bit of good news, actually great news. We are now being featured on Roku TV and Apple TV through our partner. He's running a channel called Futures TV, and we're excited because it expands our reach. It expands our audience. And if you've got a Roku TV or Apple TV, just look for Futures TV, and you should be able to find our show as well as a bunch of other really, really cool shows. Ron Goyoso is the guy who runs that, the editor-in-chief, and so we're proud to be working with him and his crew in order to take our message to a much broader audience. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, so once again, everybody, that's Roku. So if you don't have your Roku stick, go get one, because you need one, and then get your Roku app on your phone or whatever device you have so that you can watch the Business Trendsetter podcast. And then you can see our pretty faces.
Yes,
too.
Indeed. Of course, we're also on our website have always featured our pretty faces. And the other thing I want to talk about, Adam, is as we kind of go into the last third of our show here, is with respect to Bitcoin. And obviously, we've been talking about this for the entire show, the last 2 years or so. And I think it's pretty clear of where you stand on the matter. I tend to be a little bit more in the middle, sort of watching it. So let's talk about Bitcoin, Adam. Let's unleash the hounds.
It was around 2016, early 17. Bitcoin was $6,000, and I said that it was a very risky product, and I wouldn't buy it. And it went to $20,000 in December of 2017. It then went back down to $5,000. And I didn't write any more articles or talk about it very much, but it just showed that, okay, what was it drove it to 20? Why is it worth anything? I still struggle. I don't see any value to Bitcoin. Just because I could go buy an international prostitute or something like that does not make it a legitimate business, right? I don't understand why anybody wants to hold this other than they just think that some reason it's going to go up magically in value. So that was 2017. It got to $20,000. It goes down. It doesn't get back to that price again until December of 2020. It takes 3 years to get back to $20,000. And then here we are in the pandemic. Things got a little bit crazy. Some people just couldn't get enough of NFTs. It was a brand new thing on the block, and they couldn't get enough of them. So they bid it up into $68,000 by, I'm trying to remember now, it hit $68,000 at the peak in early, I think it was in early 20, right? And so now it's $20,000 again. 20,000.
Right.
And we've seen it. Elon Musk can make some announcement, and the price goes up. Of course. And back in the pandemic, Elon Musk said, I'm going to put Bitcoins on my balance sheet. He went out, instead of having cash on his balance sheet, he put Bitcoins on it. Well, if he bought those Bitcoins at $50,000, he's lost more than half that value off the balance sheet of Tesla. And if I was an investor, that would be pretty upsetting, right? You got these NFT cryptocurrencies changing value for no discernible reason, right? There's no there. There's nothing behind it. When Netflix is down 2/3, at least I can say, hey, here's a streaming company that's making its own content. It's streaming content. It's got millions of customers. They're paying money. There's things they can do to sell more stuff. There's things they can do to generate money, make more cash. I understand that. Same thing with Facebook. Same thing with Apple or any other company that got hit. Google, Netflix, Amazon. But you can't say that about Bitcoin.
No, just imagine if we ran our life with the way, if the dollar or the euro existed the way that, the big swing in value. If today you're going to go buy a loaf of bread for $4, and then tomorrow it's going to cost you 20, and then the day after that's going to cost you 2. Just imagine, how unstable our economy would be if we hung our hat on that.
I saw a guy made a video, and I loved it, and it showed a garage door, and the garage door has a crack of about 4 inches in the bottom, and a guy throws some coins under the door, and a dollar bill comes flying back out. And so he waits a little bit, and he throws the dollar bill into the door, and a $5 bill comes flying out, right? And he starts showing people. Other people come up, and they start throwing like $5 bill in, and a $10 comes out. And then some guys come up, and they haven't played the game yet. So the first time they play the game, they throw a $100 bill in, right? And $200 bills come out. And this goes on for a little while, and then pretty soon everybody throws all their money under the door, and the door closes. I thought that's such a brilliant analogy of what I think is going on with these NFTs. There's nothing there. The door could close at any time and you'll never get your money back, right? This is the startling part. The value of Bitcoin today in the world is $400 trillion. If you took all the Bitcoins multiplied by 20,000 as market cap, $400 trillion. If that goes to zero overnight, the recession that I said was likely is a foregone conclusion. If that $400 trillion evaporates into nothingness in a very short period of time, that's a lot of money. We've already seen at the peak, here we had Bitcoin was worth $1,200 trillion. I don't know what to say after trillion, so I'm stuck with 1,000. Is it quadrillion? So 1,200 trillion. We've lost 2/3 of that to get down to 4. So we've lost $800 trillion of value. And that's depressive. That's part of the problem. People that have put their money in Bitcoin have lost $800 trillion. They don't have money to buy Netflix. They don't have money to buy Amazon. They don't have money to buy good quality companies because that money's evaporated. So as this digital currency, crypto money evaporates, along with NFTs of art and everything else, as that money evaporates, that's very, very depressive on the economy, and it's not going to help stocks come back anytime soon. And it's money that's not available to invest in good companies.
Well, you saw what happened in El Salvador, where they adopted Bitcoin as their reserve currency. And I don't know how many millions of US dollars have sunk into that experiment, but it hasn't been a good ride for them.
Oh, horrible. It's thrown the country into a terrible recession and lack of economic stability. So, people just need to listen to us. Careful.
I'm a little bit more in the middle. I mean, I think that there's a lot. I'm still watching it because I think that there is some, at least the true NFT side. If there was good monetary policy, if there was somebody watching over, and I know that's part of the whole thing with this NFT blockchain stuff, is there's supposedly nobody watching.
Yeah, that's right? How it's good. Yes, right.
So, but I don't think that there's a direct line to that, but I think there could be something down the road that could be of value. I just don't think it's right now. I don't own any cryptocurrency.
So I went on a holiday to Tanzania. That's where the Serengeti is located. And I love going to the safari and watching the animals. One isolated, beautiful place. But in Tanzania, they found a stone, and it's called tanzanite. And they make jewelry out of tanzanite. And they will tell you that, I think when I was there, they said like in 12 years, all the tanzanite in Tanzania will be mined, and there won't be any more tanzanite. And the idea is you could buy this jewelry, and it'll go up in value. But you know what? It hasn't gone up anything like Bitcoin, and yet I could at least put a piece of tanzanite on a ring, and I could at least put it in a necklace or a bracelet, or I could have a jeweled box with tanzanite that I could enjoy looking at, and then I could hope it could go up in value when people want to see tanzanite and they can't mine any more of it. But the fact that people would treat Bitcoin even more favorably than they would treat tanzanite just shocks me. I mean, it's just shocking to me. There's no there. That's all I can say. And if these people lose out on their value, right. I think that's highly unfortunate. But a guy wrote me an email this week who's been following me for a long, long time, and he was and he reminded me, of the debate we'd had over time. And I told him, today it's 20,000. I said, I think it's going to see 5,000 before it'll ever see 50,000. Right. And so, if you've lost money, you can't look behind you. You better get out.
It's a pure gamble at this stage for sure. Yeah. If you're going to put money in, you don't know when that garage door is going to close. And this has been a very.
If people thought there was a time to get rid of fiat currency, it was now. It was in this recession. It was in this, what's been happening the last 6 months. You have a war in the Ukraine. It looks unstoppable, could go on for many more months. We've got problems with relationships with China. The supply chain is out of control. Recession is at 8.5%. All the things that were supposed to make us want cryptocurrency are there, and it's not going up in value.
It's not happening. Exactly.
It's not happening. And so it's not. It just won't happen. But Manny, thank you very much. And once again, I hope our listeners do look at the news and start to think about how it's going to apply to their business, because I think we're going to see some real needs for people to take some practical steps as a result of what's happening right now at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I think it's important also for those new listeners. I've been watching our metrics, and we're getting a lot of new listeners and viewers. I suggest that you go back in our archives, take a look at what we've done. We do have a YouTube channel. We do have social media. And start to immerse yourself in this new way of thinking. We also have a bunch of courses, and we've got some coaching that we offer that we've discussed in the past. Our Think Innovation course really helps to change your mindset and look at the world in a different way. And, when you think about what's happening in the world, if you are walking around blind or with your blinders on, it's time now as a business owner to really shed light on what direction you should be taking your business. And this is one thing that you and I have talked about, Adam, and really as as important as success is, not only to you and your family, but as a successful business, you start to really make massive impact in your community. And I've seen this on both sides of the aisle when you start to see a business pop in, like here in Tucson. And, we have a company called Ventana Medical that grew very quickly and got acquired by Roche. They have thousands of employees, and those employees buy, $1 billion worth of real estate and XYZ. So there's a lot of things that happen when a company is successful. So with that, Adam, have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll be talking to you very soon.
Thanks, Manny.
Cheers.